Welcome to Overwatch. This time we'll be going over the March 1st patch or version 27505. Lots of big changes in this patch, changes so light that the devs even had to prepare the community by reminding everyone that it's a beta. Nerfs for most with a buff here and there, and some interesting mechanics changes to boot. Let's begin with Genji, probably the most discussed change. Genji's health pool was changed from 200 to 150, a simple change with, well, sort of interesting consequences. Most of the high level players I've spoken to, and one or two I've gone up against, seem to confirm my own thoughts on this change, that for top tier Genjis, it'll lead to very minor changes but doesn't actually impact his survivability as much as you'd expect. The big thing with Genji is his ability to get in, deal high damage and escape relatively easily thanks to his free dash after a kill. A good Genji avoids damage by jumping around his opponent and using the damage immunity deflection brings to prevent lethal damage. As such, his ability to act as an assassin is still very much intact. Of the people I've spoken to, they seem to universally agree that right now Genji will have to be a little bit more cautious, but once engaged, his ability to swiftly and safely assassinate a low hit point target remains unchanged. Personally, I think they hit the wrong spot. Genji's durability was never in his hit point pool. It was always that Reflect conveyed full immunity to damage from the front unless a splash hit in front of you or next to you. Melee hits would do nothing, for example, and I would have loved to have seen his melee immunity during deflection removed. Make it so that the team can pummel him into the ground with their fists if he ends up surrounded in the middle of the team, not so that he can just stall long enough for him to escape. I would have also liked to see the deflect tightened a little bit and made a little bit tighter on his body, but you can't have everything, and I understand that that could be a little tricky with lag compensation and such. Next up, and infinitely more significant in my opinion, is the Lucio change. Lucio got hit hard, going from 200 to 150 health, and this has caused a dramatic shift in his playstyle. Previously, Lucio was the super aggro support, able to engage and disengage safely, relying on self-healing to rapidly absorb damage. Now a stray rocket can nearly one-shot him, and as a result, Lucio must play more cautiously. This change has some far-reaching implications too. Thanks to his new vulnerability to picks and how essential he is to the team, Lucio's squishy status might see us end up in a JUNKRAT Widowmaker Soldier 76 meta at the higher levels. Heroes looking for rapid kills before initiating a push. Why risk an all-out engagement when you can just fish for the Lucio, with additional safety knowing that Genji will have to be safer with his engages. As with the Genji change, I think this is the easy and a little bit lazy solution to the problem, which doesn't help the game overall. Removing Lucio's ability to play aggressively with some slight semblance of safety hurts the game as a whole. What I would have liked to have seen is a reduction to his self-healing. No other healer gets this massive safety net as much as Lucio does, and dampening the self-heal would lead to a Lucio being aggressive less often, but not rule it out entirely. He'd just have to take more time licking his wounds. The next biggest change is Winston, with some heavy hits to his shield barrier. Total health on the barrier has been trimmed down from 1000 to 600, a drop of 400 hit points. And the cooldown now starts after the barrier is deployed, effectively adding a good 8 seconds to the cooldown. This double whammy makes Winston feel far less safe. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not going to shed any tears for a Winston nerf. I think the last two gameplay and chills I've made it perfectly apparent my thoughts on him. Briefly, that he could do too much damage too safely. His ability to leap in, safely hold down the left mouse button and leap out made him deeply unsatisfying to play against, and playing him, while it has its moments, always felt a little dishonest to me. With the change, his barrier breaks incredibly quickly, leaving him vulnerable far faster. The result is Winston is much less aggressive, however he's also weaker as a main tank. I do worry slightly that this change was a little bit too much and might resign him to the role of being the anti-Genji gorilla who occasionally helps on the final push by shoving people away from the payload in his ultimate. Increasing the hit points up to 750 or 800 might help hit the sweet spot. Part of me thinks people just needed training in hitting the barrier, and this patch has done exactly that. The cooldown nerf seems a little high, but we'll see. One change I would like considered is going back to 1000 hit points, but having the barrier only work one way. This makes it harder for Winston to dance back and forth through the barrier and open him up to more punishment for a cheeky engage. I'll also quickly add the caveat here that I understand Winston's role is to be the aggressive tank to get into your face, but what he was doing before wasn't that. It was getting into the face of about 4 other people on the enemy team and getting out completely safely and scot-free. This was happening far too often, so I absolutely understand and am behind the need to nerf him. He was too simple for too much reward, basically. Next up, let's look at JUNKRAT. He saw a major buff to his ultimate. The Riptide's hit points went from 50 health to 150, with the drawback that if it got destroyed, the tire deflates sadly instead of detonating. This means the tire is less likely to get picked off before reaching its intended target, but if you do go the wrong way with it, you'll lose any effect from your ultimate, which is pretty much the case beforehand anyway. The splash damage was also changed, with damage fall off being far heavier towards the edges. In short, get the tire on target or you'll have very little effect. Do keep in mind, however, that the tire also does more damage right in the center than it used to. You can now pretty much one-shot everything and anything. Now I like this change. It makes the tire more reliable and also properly rewards targeting it. Beforehand, it was often just ignored once it had reached your support. You were stuck in a kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Now it's more reliable when used properly and more fun to play against. It rewards skillful play on both sides, so it gets a thumbs up from me. Zarya saw some significant changes. Her projected barrier's duration was reduced from 4 seconds to 2. As someone who plays a lot of Zarya, I feel confident in saying that while it certainly had its impact on damage absorbed, the game has a post-game card showing the exact value, and that seems about halved, go figure. It doesn't seem to have impacted her strength much. A good Zarya will still be looking for barriers reactively rather than proactively, although I do worry that this won't help her issue of requiring people to react properly when barriered. Mei saw some heavy buffs to her endothermic blaster. Now it massively slows the moment it makes contact with the enemy, making it easier for her to freeze them, although the time to freeze remains unchanged. The bigger change was to Blizzard. Now the effect of her ultimate cannot be blocked, meaning the entire radius is subject to freezing, even if you have a barrier in place. The developer explanation for these changes interests me, largely because they state correctly that Mei struggles against faster and more agile heroes because they can frequently just escape. However, they used to do this by using an ability, blink, wraithform, dash, so on, and they can still do just that. This might help in making her a strong anti-Genji, but being honest, Genji just kills her if he's good enough. The ultimate change is a real spicy one. Now her ultimate is incredible for contesting objectives and zoning. We might see a few more defensive Meis spring up as a result. Mercy got a handsome buff with getting her ability to zip to corpses back, a change that brings her viability right back up, especially as pit comps start to swing back in. Her damage amp on Pharah, Widow, JUNKRAT and Soldier becomes more in demand. I'm expecting to see a lot more Mercy pop up, although whether she does or not depends largely on how potent Zenyatta or Genji, if you want, remains. Last but not least, Bastion saw a buff in getting his weak spot changed to be in line with everyone else's, a simple 2x damage modifier on it rather than the 3x modifier it was before. It can still be killed in a single tracer clip, but that was pretty much the case before he had his hit point pool more than halved. Finally, for hero changes, Zenyatta gets a UI touch-up, notifications now appear when your orbs return. It's a nice feature and, well, there's not really much else to say about it. Outside of the patch notes, it also seems that Pharah's rockets fire a little bit smoother now. I'd like to say I'd noticed this, but I'm leery of it being a placebo. All I know is that rocket launcher feels slightly more responsive and it's a bit nicer. Next up, gameplay changes. Most notably, the payload now moves faster when 1 or 2 people were on it than it did before, still moving at the same speed it did pre-patch with 3 people. This is a change I really like. It makes playing aggressively and engaging more favourable, rather than having to have 3 people on the payload to move it optimally. 2 people might be the best investment now, with 4 people going ahead and screening, although of course it does depend on your team. And in misc changes, loot boxes saw changes in sprays and voice lines becoming all common, although this isn't reflected in the pricing in-game. A number of voice lines still remain at 75 coins. Icons and poses have shifted to all be rare now, and 50-150 payouts of credits will apparently be more numerous in boxes, with legendary coins being slightly rarer. And of course, the finest change, voice line spam, is now back. A dramatic patch in one I'm unsure of. That being said, I'll finish with the caveat that I only see my thin slice of the game, and that slice is in the top 20 percentile. I can't comment with the authority or data that Blizzard can on what happens elsewhere. With Genji and Lucio in particular, however, I can't help but feel that the wrong things were tuned. Still, this might bring Tracer back a little more, and things look good for a number of my favourite heroes. Pharah, Widow, Mercy and Zarya all remain very much viable. Thanks for watching to the end. I've been Josh, one voice amongst many, and this has been patch notes for the March 1st patch. I'm super curious to see how this shakes at the top end play, and I fear slightly that we might be entering a slow pick-based meta. We'll see. Toodles.